So, welcome to another C-Suite Insider Conversation. Today, it's going to be with a buddy of mine, Mithch Reed, Captain, United States Army, retired, father of 5. What's the mix of children you have, Mitch?
Thanks. We've got 3 girls and 2 boys.
Okay. And Mitch is also very involved in the community and in community leadership and drives insight and wisdom and that kind of thing, not only for our community leaders, but for the veteran community as a whole. So, Mitch, tell me a little bit about your story. What's the Mitch story?
Goodness, that's a long story. I'll give you the short version of the Mitch story. So I medically retired from the Army in 2020. I was an air and missile defense officer. Prior to that, did a short stint as a mental health counselor. Went to Johnson University. That's where I got my counseling degree. And then, during my time at Johnson, though, I lived up in Tennessee, and we were working in a variety of clinical facilities providing acute care to adolescents and families, and then decided I wanted to go into the Army. Came back to Florida for a short time here in Oakland County, actually. So while I was waiting, I was a substitute teacher, test mentor, and then I went off to the Army from there. And during my time, though, I did deploy to Afghanistan, got to go to the Middle East a little bit, supporting our folks over there, and I really enjoyed it. Did some space stuff, did everything from short range air and missile defense to high altitude. Just things like Patriot. And then after I got out, went contracting here at Hurlburt Airfield, just down the road. And then after contract, did a short time as GS, and I decided that I would change it up a little bit. Went to startups and consulting, and I haven't looked back since. It's been great. A little before that, though, I actually started a charity in 2018 called United XP. It's a 501c3 charity that's done really well since. We've had a lot of fun working around the world with that.
So tell us about that, though. I mean, what's its mission, and how can people get involved with that, and who should get involved?
Sure. Yeah. So a little bit of context. So United XP, it's a 501c3 whose mission is advancing the world through gaming, education, and charity, right? And so we had this vision where I kind of did a napkin strategy. And I was thinking to myself, how do we galvanize the most people for the least amount of money and time spent to do positive social impact things? Specifically, this is 2018, so it's when Hurricane Michael hit, and we were trying to figure out how do we get volunteers to show up to support Hurricane Michael relief efforts. We didn't already have infrastructure in place, so we helped other charities and helped the community out as a force multiplier instead of trying to set up our own vehicle. And so we ended up doing that, and we had hundreds of folks show up that, it just so happened to game, like, dude, you guys are the gamer group. We want to help you guys. And then we'll go out and do these work orders for these other groups as the gaming community. And so we did about $250,000 of work orders in 5 days. And so that kind of set the precedent. Since then, we became the world's first organization to set up a remote emergency operations center powered by the gaming community. We also do things like strategic consulting and workforce development, and a whole bunch of other interesting strategic things. And we've later morphed into a strategic consultancy that provides free consulting to other charities. So that's really what United XP has grown into. If you want to get involved, you can check us out at uknighttedxp.org. And you can contact us, and we'll get with you right away.
Okay. And you did some things. I know we talked when Helene and Milton hit, and you guys were up in North Carolina doing some things with housing, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so the way the model works is we look for other partners who are boots on ground partners, while we serve as like the command and control, research, and situational awareness function of it all. Definitely, it's a very scalable model, and it allows people to, even from the comfort of their own home, assist with disaster relief efforts. Could be just locating tarps, could be coordinating logistics, or deconflicting sit reps with different counties or parishes or whatever their regions are called, depending on where you're responding to.
Right. Yeah, and we talked about that and the whole readiness profile that you can do inside of the vault, the VetCV vault, and keeping track of that, and if you're willing and able to participate, and that kind of thing. So we probably should spool those discussions up again since it's hurricane season.
That's right. We're getting close. And so in my deal, I've gotten to meet some incredible people in that space. We have 5 strategic areas in United XP. We focus on cyber safety and security, which we lump into digital citizenship. So we actually have a cyber task force inside of United XP. We have our workforce development component, military defense, education, and of course, disaster response and recovery. Those are our 5 key areas that United XP focuses on. And so because of those areas, I've become a global SME in each of those topics. And so my connections and my network really grew to the extent that I ended up getting all kinds of crazy offers. A lot of them I just didn't have time to take, and so I had to pick and choose what boards I sat on, what companies. Eventually I created a consulting company and being able to help for-profit social impact companies now. So that's a lot of what I do for a living.
Yeah, that's great. So you've obviously landed on your feet after you get out of the Army, and also it's interesting that you were in the mental health space and then you decided to join the Army and then get into missiles. Warheads on foreheads kind of a deal, I guess. Tough love, I guess.
That's right.
Ultimate tough love. Be nice or else bad stuff's gonna happen.
And it might get a stinger. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. A real one. But your transition, tell me about your transition. So first of all, you went from mental health as an adult in a career into joining the Army. How old were you when you joined the Army then?
Late 20s. So I went to basic training and then officer candidate school. And so for the Army, at least, there's 3 commissioning sources. West Point being, your cream of the cream commissioning source, if you will, ROTC being the bulk, and then OCS kind of picks up the needs that, Congress kind of said, hey, we still need to meet X numbers,
Right. But still in your late 20s, it's a real career change, right? And also you've been around a while. So you're in boot camp or you're in OCS with 22-year-olds or 21-year-olds, right?
Right.
And not boot camp for you, but still, you've got a few years, and those are formidable years. Those 5 or 6 years in your 20s, you're transitioning from being a kid kind of to a man, right? In this case, or an adult. So you had some advantage, don't you think, about when you?
Oh, for sure. So they do send OCS op to basic training. So you go to basic training first on a basic training contract. If you don't make it through OCS, you remain enlisted for the duration of your contract. So it's kind of an interesting deal that they give you. The Army calls it a 09 Sierra packet. So I remember showing up to basic training, to your point, a little older, a little experienced, and the drills were very good. I went to Jackson, very talented group, and they looked at the packets and they're like, oh, there's Reed. He was the counselor. I'm like, oh man, how do they know this? This is day 0. I'm thinking I was just going to be quiet. I just finished, just got there to basic training, got off the bus, and they're already singling me out. They're like, oh, you think you want to be an officer, huh? All right. I was like, oh man, they already looked at the packet, of course,
Right.
And, it was actually a lot of fun for me, to be honest. I really had a good time at basic. And what I did before going to basic is I have some personal mentors in my life that were retired or senior, a couple senior officers and a couple senior enlisted. And one of them is my step grandpa, Bill Leach, and Bill was like, Mitch, he's like, I'm going to tell you one piece of advice about the whole thing while you're at basic training. Since you're going to go the commission route, basic training is the last time that your enlisted brothers and sisters in arms will be a peer to you as far as the rank structure goes. He's like, take advantage of that and enjoy it. It's going to be a really short time for you to be a peer with them. He's like, and have fun with it. And I'm glad he told me that, because I started to see what he meant. And it was really powerful what I got to see, thinking through that lens in basic training. I'm like, if I'm going to eventually command, these guys, this is a invaluable experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Mentors, since you brought it up, let's talk about that, because some of us, without knowing it, meaning without it being an action plan to go and find a mentor for specific things,
Mhm.
we found people that took us under their wing and they became our mentors. But we didn't have, like, it wasn't like, oh, I have a task. I need to go find 3 mentors in these 3 things, and then I need to figure out how to get a hold. How do I approach them? How do I know that that they're the right people? How do I get them to open up and share their life, experiences with me, and the do's and don'ts and where the landmines are? There's no game plan for it, for me anyway. It was like it just happened. But in retrospect, if I was 20 or 22, a young enlisted guy or a young officer, what would you do differently if you now we have the both of us have the advantage of hindsight to actually say, you know what, it's probably a good idea for me to go and find some mentors. What would you recommend people do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the number one thing, it goes back to people. People are the backbone of every organization. And we hear this all the time, but honestly, relationships are so important. People ask me, Mitch, how did you get connected? How are you so successful with this startup or consulting or whatever it was I'm doing? It all goes back to relationships, is what it
Yeah.
does. And so if I could go back, I would make sure that I wouldn't allow fear and my nervousness, maybe my lack of self-confidence in the moment, to approach that individual and say, listen, I really liked how you handled, maybe that formation or how you lead. I like your leadership style. I'd like to learn more. Would you consider, maybe me being a mentor, or you being my mentor, And I think having that straight up conversation at some point when it makes sense is important. There were many times I can look back where I didn't. So I was like, nah, he's not going to take me serious, or I'm just an LT or whatever, and you don't do it for
Right.
whatever reason. I think we miss a lot of the possible opportunity. Who knows what those could have been, right? But
Yeah.
those are shots that we didn't take. And of course, you're not going to make the shots you don't take.
Yeah. And I don't remember as a young person ever really saying to anybody who were my mentors, like Navy captains and doctors and, lieutenant commanders or lieutenants or whatever, actually asking them, hey, would you consider playing the role of a mentor to me? You know what I mean? But the question I guess I have is, if I would have said that, as opposed to just kind of going through it, how much more would I have gotten out of it? And then how much more could I then share faster with somebody, that are my peers, and how would that have helped my career in the first place? If I would have just had that little extra effort to say, you know what, Captain Smith, obviously I work for you, sir, but would you consider being, taking on a little bit of a title as a mentor for me? And whatever you say, sir, if you tell me to take a hike, I get it, but if you don't, just give me some direction, because I'm just trying to get there faster, with people like you who've been there.
Yeah. So I did there in later couple of years. I did actually do exactly what we're talking about, where I did approach, there was the informal connection where the gentleman was already kind of doing it, right? So then I
Right.
approached him during a sit down, and I said, listen, I really have a lot of respect for the way that you've done certain things. I'm impressed. I'd love to learn about that, and I want to know if you consider it. I was really shocked to find how receptive he was. Absolutely, would be honored to do it. And I'm like, oh man, that was should have asked that like a year ago. Like
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's my point, right? So going back to your idea about not being afraid or not being nervous about it, do it. Ask somebody, because
Absolutely. Yeah.
it's most by far people will take that as a positive gesture and a gesture of respect as well. And then now they're on the line a little bit. Like, now maybe they'll just go and do a little bit more. Oh, by the way, Anderson, here's this, go read this book, okay. I wouldn't have gotten that piece of advice unless I officially asked them as a mentor. Now, I didn't do it as a young person. I was just lucky to have enough volume of mentors around me that kind of became mentors. They knew they were taking me under their wing, but I never officially asked. And if I did ask, it would have been like adding fuel to the fire, I think. And I think that's important for people to know that they can do. When you were a counselor, you thought you had your purpose.
Right.
Then you decided that wasn't enough, and you joined the Army, and you had a new purpose. And then when you got out, you had to find another purpose. How important is that for you to find your purpose?
Oh my goodness. Yes, that's a very profound question. So the common theme here is service, right? So counseling, you're in service to others. Your uniform is a service to others. My charity was about serving others in community. Even in my consulting practice, I only take on social impact companies. If there's not a social impact component, I don't take it on. I don't even consider it. And so for me, the purpose was people. People were the purpose. People, community and people, family. I've always had that focus for a long time, and that compass has allowed me to transition very well. And I was raised by a lot of our folks here in the area, actually, who mentored me when I was little, because I was one of those kids that thought all the time. I was one of those strategic thinkers and planners, and I was out playing and building forts, but I was the guy that was looking at the strategy of the fort.
Right.
So, but I was focused on the relationships. I've always been that way. I'm very thankful for that. So I remember people, and I have very deep loyalty for people, and those basic principles of selfless service and focusing on people and servant leadership are ingrained in everything that I do. And so when I transitioned, to be honest, it was just a lot of fun. To me, it was just a change of scenario, a different uniform, a different hierarchy. And what I see when people have struggles with transition is they don't have the same level of foundational purpose, right? And I was very thankful that counseling actually set me up for service. I didn't realize it at the time. And what I'm getting at is, I also went to a Bible college, and that helped root a lot of my faith and personal purpose. But the counseling piece rooted me in the toolkit that I had at my disposal, if you will. And so when I went into service, I didn't realize how useful those things would be. And turns out they set a foundation that is priceless, truly.
The foundation sounds like it really tied to you figuring out how to create your social network, right? Because in the military, we have our social networks with our teams, and we have orders to go be with that team. So therefore, that's the social network. We don't have orders. We don't have a team specifically when we transition to be civilians. We got to find out, if we tie our purpose, we got to figure out what networks that we need to, who do we want to hang out with? Who are going to be our new friends, right? That bond with us personally and our families, right? But also maybe can help with your career moves and your decisions about where you want to go and how you're going to get there. So making new friends doesn't seem to be tough for you, right?
No, that's right. Yeah, I had a mentor that told me, he's like, Mitch, you're only as good as your relationships with your peers, laterally and vertically. It's like, if you don't have those relationships, you're not going to be an effective leader ever. Mm-hmm. And I was like, it's kind of what we're talking about here, is that relationship building, and surround yourself with people that are more successful than you, and people that align with your values, that work hard, and so I did that. And so my Army family is still my family.
Sure.
The folks that I deployed with, the folks that I served with that were close to me, are still close to me now.
So you have 5 kids. what's it like being a parent in the military, and what's it like being a parent in this as a civilian?
Oh man, yeah, it's a great question. So the military, it's you know, it, you have less freedom. You have to report your accountability more. You belong, essentially to the military, and that in itself is a sacrifice. You have requirements that you have to do that have repercussions if you don't meet the standards and qualifications. It's a very stressful environment, and so I truly applaud anyone that's in, because it's a lot. It's a lot. Even if you're not deploying, that level of sacrifice and the readiness state that you have to maintain requires sacrifice for a family. And the support system, the family support, the all those pieces of the ecosystem are so critically important. And so I would just say that having kids in the military is great. There's a great support group. You're very close because you're all sharing all that stuff together. But when you're not in the military, you no longer have those confines, and you can truly go as fast or slow or whatever it is that you desire. And we're thankful that we did well. We could go anywhere on the planet, and we've just chosen to stay here in Florida.
Yeah. So your military experience as a parent, how did that shape your approach as a civilian parent? I mean, are there any military-esque cues? I mean, obviously, the thing we hear about, well, my dad was in the military, so he made me make my bunk every day, and my haircut was all squared away and whatever,
Sure.
that kind of thing. But a lot of us exaggerate on that, it's a badge of honor now, but and it wasn't ever that extreme.
Yeah, you're right. So for me, there were one of my favorite things out of officer candidate school at Benning was standards, no compromise. It's one of the things that we would have to say when we saluted, and I really liked it. It stuck with me my whole time, and it still does. I would argue that military parents learn higher standards of discipline in their daily life, and discipline. Look, a regiment works really well for a family. Being on a schedule. Keeping up with your house, your cars, your maintenance, plans, if you will, for your life cycle sustainment plan for your electronics, all those type of things you think about more so probably than your average person does, just because of how regimented the military schedule and milieu is. So then when I got out, it was so easy. I was like, oh man, this is way easier. I just have to translate how I talk to people, how I write. My writing, I have terrible military writing styles if I let myself go. So I've had to translate my skill sets quite a bit. But beyond that, parenting really benefited from the structure in the regiment, because now we can plug and play anywhere almost seamlessly. Yeah.
Now, how many duty stations or how many communities did you live in, or have you lived in since graduating from college, as an example?
Ooh, that's a good question. Because I moved quite a bit in college. I had to look probably between 9 and 10. I think it's 10, just off the top of my head.
So once you started having children, let's talk about a new community where you have new orders and you got to bring, the family comes, and let's talk about schools, for instance, and education.
Sure.
And the same thing as a civilian. What would you recommend, now that you've been through it more than someone who's just a new parent, that people look into when they're going to a new duty station with their family, and what do they really need to, who should they call? Who should they meet with about that for school, for the kids, and make sure the kids are good? And then the same thing when you transition out, what would you recommend as part of deciding where you want to live and what impact do you think schooling for your children should have on your decision?
Oh my goodness, that's such an important topic. So before I had kids, I was still very actively involved, because I did adolescent counseling when I was in college and in Tennessee before I moved back down here and then went to the military. And then when I was in the military as a leader, I was constantly trying to help parents navigate that, because that was often the first thing they would ask. what do you think, sir? They're like, I know you don't have any kids, but do you know much about what's the situation there like for schools, whatever.
Right.
And so the number one thing there is safety, right? Is it safe? The second thing is, what's going to be the quality of the education that they receive? Is it going to be a decent education, or am I going to send them somewhere? And if you're coming from different states have different educational standards, right? And different requirements, different testing wickets and things. So it's a very complex question, and it changes by region.
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I personally have a few things that I look at, and there's a lot to this. There isn't really any best answer to this. I think parents need to always do their due diligence. It takes a lot of extra work. It's a lot of research. There is no easy answer. I wouldn't trust any single source on anything relating to a school, including from official sources, right? You really need to think through, look at the crime data in the neighborhood, look at maybe you can pull some of the records from the sheriff's department or local law enforcement agencies, whoever manages it in that region or state, look at their test standards, if they have any for the state, and how does that school perform? Look at their averages over the course of the last 5 years. Look at some trends. Is it going up or down? And does that fall above or below the average in the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same is true of reported incidences for each school. Look at the crime around the schools, the neighborhoods around the schools, and think to yourself, if my child's there and I'm not there, based on statistics, what would be the chances that a mishap might occur, or an accident, or a theft, or whatever? You can kind of get a general idea of how often those things are happening around school.
Right.
And if you're able, if you're willing to commute, maybe that's less of a concern. But you also have to make sure that you're allowed to commute far enough outside of your own district to be able to get your child to that school too.
Right.
So then you have to look at, okay, well, am I geographically locked into a location? So if we pick a house on this part of town, does that mean we're no longer qualified for the other side of town, which is where the school is? But we can't afford that side of town because it's too expensive.
Right.
So you almost need to make an Excel sheet for yourself and kind of come up with what are my requirements, right? I care about vocational skills. I want to make sure there's a digital citizenship or cybersecurity component to this. I want to make sure the school is near, whatever. Come up with that Excel sheet and then go through every school and line up where it falls with all the things that you as a parent define as a requirement for your child that you want them to have. Then you kind of rack and stack, make your own tracking mechanism, if you will, for best schools.
Right.
My opinion is it should be a family decision that you're, both parents or one parent or however many are comfortable with. And that way, you did your diligence, you made the best decision you could, and roll with it.
Right. Well, and there's also, you said you went to a religious school, right? Was that?
Yeah, it was a non-denominational school in Tennessee called Johnson University. Yeah.
Okay. So, today we're hearing, this school district and this school board is this way and this, and, what, as it relates to finding a school that is in line with whatever you believe in, and not just religiously, but just socially and those kinds of things. And then as it relates to the school board, what does a parent need to know about a school board? How powerful are they? How can you affect change? What can you really expect to do if you come in and you want to make some improvements in the way those schools are run as a parent? And if they are interested in that, what approach would you recommend that they take?
Yeah, so school boards, they vary a little bit by state. They typically, at least in Florida, here in Oklahoma County, which I'm very familiar with, they're responsible largely for providing oversight to the general operations of the district, focused specifically on policy and budget. That's their bread and butter. And so you need to make sure that you read the mission and vision of the school district. and then look at the description of what the board is responsible for, and what falls within their purview. Every state should have that published, should be public, and then pay attention to the minutes. You don't have to sit and watch, an hour-long, 2-hour-long board meeting, but at least read the minutes and kind of see what are those board members talking about. What key things are they honing in on? Does it align with you or does it not? And then you can kind of compare what they're saying in the meeting versus what's being actioned. Look at historical adoptions of policies and see what things are being pushed. And you can see also financial reports to see where the money is being spent. Is it being spent on, architecture and foundational things? Is it being spent more on social programs? Are they paying people well? And where were the pain points? Maybe it's transportation or updating some of their bus fleet, or what kind of spend do they have on nutrition? What kind of nutritional value do the school lunches have? What kind of partnerships are they trying to, make sure that kids are eating not just food? Because one thing to feed kids food, it's another thing to feed them healthy food.
Right.
Who's defining that? So all these things you're going to find if you start digging into the documentation and the work of the school board and the superintendent.
Yeah, very good insight. Tell me about your thoughts and pros and cons on homeschooling. Did you ever homeschool your children, or what?
No, my wife and I have talked about it. There's pros and cons. I'm a big proponent of the competitive marketplace. Let's be honest. If parents want to take their children to a charter school or a private school, they should have every right to do it, and we should make sure that as leaders that we're facilitating what the parents and the kids need. Kids have different needs, parents have different views, and this is the United States, and I'm very proud that we have the ability to have a competitive marketplace.
Right.
So you and I talked about a little bit that I'm running for school board, but one of the things that is important to me, and I'm going to be talking a lot about, is that I want the private and charters to compete with me because I'm competitive. So, if I were to make it in, I'm going to have fun making the district as good as it can be because I love competition. And competition for the benefit of kids, everybody wins. And I think that's the approach we should be taking with this. And so homeschool to me is a compelling option for maybe parents that travel a lot, or parents that are very, maybe they have specific curricula that they want to attach to because their kids are very passionate about vocations, or maybe they get into high school and they realize that they need to be on an even more accelerated track than what's available because they just don't have the resources in the district or county that they're in. I see that happen a lot. A lot of times the public school system simply just doesn't have the same resources that parents could plug their kids into. And homeschool groups are getting creative and innovative with the marketplace, and they're finding high-level resources and standards to bring to homeschool capabilities. So I would challenge Americans to continue to go fast and go hard so that China doesn't before us.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's I agree 100%. And I say that being an immigrant. You can probably tell by my Chinese accent, right, that I'm not from this country. But I came the legal way as a Danish immigrant, and I joined the U.S. Navy. So
I love that.
Don't say anything bad about Denmark, but definitely don't say anything bad about the United States. So anyway.
To clarify, and I'm speaking specifically as the Chinese Communist Party because I love everything about Chinese culture, but the Communist Party and what they're trying to do to kind of fight against the American education system and our values is a travesty.
Yeah. Well, but no matter what, whether you're homeschooling or your child is going to a private or public school, I think there's a lot to be said about parental responsibility as well, and also creating a little bit of competition for the children, allowing them to be competitive academically and athletically, right? I think my opinion is that we need a little bit more of that. I think we've gone away from that, and it doesn't allow people to scrape their knees when they try and they don't succeed it gives us as a parent the opportunity to help them back up and keep going forward. But there's a tremendous amount of commitment that a parent has to have as far as the child's education. If you're homeschooling, you better stick to it and push. I would imagine it is work, right? And if you do it right, it's a lot of work.
No, that's right. And it's and regardless of whatever schooling option they choose, you have to lead. There has to be leadership present, whether it's a public school, private school, or a charter school, or whatever. You need leadership. They need leadership. And we, the adults, have to lead these guys into the what I call the era of automation. It's coming really quick, and the landscape's changing. And we have to. All of us need to be asking ourselves realistically: are we truly preparing these young people to be competitive in a global economy?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You're clearly already a community leader, and you just mentioned that you're running. And of course, we're not political here. We're American, patriotic.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's right.
We have a big tent. So long as you're a patriot and you want to do the right thing and do good things and protect the homeland, and then our job in the military, right? First, we protect our homeland, then we go out and protect those that can't help themselves, that need protecting around the world. So the military leadership training that you had, and you're already doing things as a leader in the community. The next chapter of leadership for you, where do you think you want to go, and why?
It's a good question.
Important to you?
Yeah, so for me, it's about leaving a legacy for the generations, and making, improving the foxhole, and hopefully it's better than it was before I started, so that when my littles and everybody else is out there, they get to come behind and really enjoy, hopefully, some of what we've set into motion. So all of the companies I've involved with, I have an agreement with a mobile quantum company, working with an AI company very closely that I'm a shareholder for, have all kinds of interesting things that are paving the way for the future, all of which have social impact things. And so I want to make sure that I'm investing actively in the foundation of the future, bridging the generational divide, making sure that we're maintaining the pacing threat with adversaries in order to hopefully maintain stability and global peace as long as we can. And those efforts are very important to me. I'm also very focused on vocational skills. We have a national trade skill. Actually, it's a global trade skill deficit. We have a war against the American family and American family values. So we need to fight for that in our work ethic and our volunteerism. So we definitely have some work to do. But I think all these things are humanitarian focus. They're bipartisan. I'm also very involved with disaster response, research and development as it pertains to mental health and trauma. One of my clients has a trauma detection test, actually. It's just incredible stuff. So to me, it's all about making sure we're focused on the right things.
Yeah, you talked about your work, and in full disclosure, we're also working with the company that you're working with, and we're trying to get something together to provide telehealth services, right? So as that rolls out, I think it's just a testament to you always looking out for someone else or wanting to do something that will help the greater good, right? Maybe it's because it was ingrained in you as a mental health counselor, and then translating that into leadership, and the nexus of wanting to lead and help people out of a crisis or some stress that they have to not make it worse translates well, in my opinion, to military leadership, which translates well into a solid, reasonable parenting philosophy, right? And then now you're stepping out again to do more even. So I don't know how you figured out how to get 29 hours out of the day, but there's something about that. But to that end, look, you and and everyone else, we start off as human beings. So I guess if I could ask for one piece of advice from you, if there's somebody out there that says, you know what, how do I start my path to have this, to build the confidence that he or she may have seen in you today in this video, right? Because there are a lot of things that people like you and I do. We don't know if it's going to work out, but we do it anyway. And we try, right?
Right.
So, what advice would you give to a young parent or a young, person in general, parent or not parent, uh, about daring alacrity and believing in yourself enough, or what do you need to do to get that belief up to try something, to start proving to yourself in even small bites that you can do it? What's next?
Yeah, I love that. There's a couple components to this that are real simple, but they truly work. I started it in college, and then the military codified it, and today really works really well. You need to come up with some type of routine for yourself. Everyone's different. Everyone has different needs, different sleep needs, food needs. But you got to figure out your food and your sleep and your self-care, and then your recharge time. You have to find a way to recharge. Everybody's different, so I don't have a formula for you. Sorry, if you're an introvert or extrovert, it's gonna vary. Once you figure those things out, really work on the basics. You kind of hit on loving yourself, loving others, and community, and caring. You need to have some level of empathy to really get after it. But then you need to write things down, and you start coming up with, what are your goals? Where are you going? Where do you want to go? And you need to set some type of small daily goals, and then have some type of long-term goals. And you should do both, because the short-term immediate goals are easy wins for you to knock out. Clean the car, make your bed, something simple. But trust me when I say they're incremental steps towards progress, towards the greater good, and they will add up. It's added up for me every time. I don't always succeed, but I fail fast, and I get back up and I go to the next thing, and then I learn. So you're going to fail. It's okay. Learn from it, drive on. And next thing you know, you're going to be 10 steps further than you were. And, things happen. I get it. But hunt the good stuff and prevail. And humans are great at that.
Yeah. Someone told me when I was in my mid-20s about what they had done is they created a cork board. There are two of them. One would be filled with things that you would like to achieve, goals or tasks, right? And The other would be, once you've done it, you move it over there. You physically move it over there. And I'm 63 now, and I was at 25 at the time. I still have those. And they're called vision boards now, the big fancy term for it. But back then, it's cork boards. And so, for instance, I wanted to hit a certain milestone in my income. So I literally took a 4x4 and I wrote that. I put down this number with dollar signs, and it was over there for so long, And I wanted this kind of car. I wanted this kind of watch. I wanted to be the best dad. Now, the best dad is still on the left, because and my kids are 40 and 38 now, but I have grandchildren. But I don't think you'll ever fully be able to move that to the right. But subconsciously, when you walk by, even if you're not looking at it directly, you can still say, okay, well, yeah, I did that. I did that. I was able to accomplish that. I got my degree, or I got my technical degree, or I started my own company, or I, got that, reached 5 children, or whatever it is. That was instrumental for me to do. And I still talk about it. Obviously, I still talk about it today. So
I love that. And you just remember your friends and your family. They're the most important. They're the core of everything. They're the continuity after service, during service, towards the end of your life. And so everything that I've done has been family centric and things that I want for my family. And if you can answer that question, is what I'm doing going to support, not just financially, but holistically, everything that I stand for, my values, right? And am I going to sleep good at night? I'd say I've gotten to the point where I sleep pretty dang good at night.
Yeah. Well, it's it's been great to have this conversation with you, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this and sharing your life story, your philosophies, in general as a parent, and also your experiences about how you have made Mithch Reed, right, and made this family man and made this leader to where you are in this chapter in your life. And then you have lots of chapters to go, but it's been great to have you on this. And